Okay, and now as promised, we get to total abstraction. We're going to start with the Turkish example. And again here what we have is three different forms of a noun, the absolutive, plural, and objective forms of the noun. These are different categories of case and number features in Turkish. Turkish has pretty elaborate morphology, inflectional morphology in both nouns and verbs. And yeah, so what do we see here? Well, it looks like the absolutive form is going to be the shortest and the most basic. So we're getting things like eep, deep, at, sach, ach. The plural forms all end in a sequence of l, some vowel, and a r sound. I will tell you, just giving it away, that the nature of that vowel in the plural depends on the vowels elsewhere in the word, and we're not going to look at this pattern until next semester. So just ignore those vowel differences. What we can say for sure is it's L vowel R or L vowel R for the plural. Then in the objective here, we're getting ones that look just like the absolutive but have a final vowel at the end. And again, the nature of those vowels differs depending on the vowels elsewhere in the word. This is a pattern of long-distance vowel harmony. We're going to study it next semester, and it's irrelevant to the thing I'm looking at here. So basically what we have is the plain forms on the left, the absolutive. We didn't find anything inflectional there. The plural forms take a suffix, L vowel R, and the objective forms take a suffix that's just a vowel. And what are we seeing here? Well, some of these noun roots alternate and some of them don't. So we have ones like eep, where the objective form is just that plus a vowel. And then we have ones like deep, which are otherwise very similar, except when you get over here, oops, in the objective form, this one becomes voiced. So what do you think is going on here so far? So far there's nothing complicated. We have seen exactly this pattern before. What is it? It's word final devoicing, just like in German. When you're before a vowel, you can see that underlyingly there are both voiceless and voiced stops in Turkish, but at the end of a word where you don't have this inflectional suffix, that neutralizes to voiceless. This is exactly the same as German. May also show up on one of your homeworks, hint, hint. Okay, so that part's easy. And indeed, we have this like cool minimal pair here, horse and name, where if you don't inflect them, they sound exactly the same, at and at. And it's only when you put the following vowel in that you can see they're actually two different phonological forms, atu and adu. Voicing contrast before vowels in Turkish neutralizes to voiceless at the end of a word. Cool, so far so good. And then we get down to the last few here, starting with, we get down to like heaven and strawberry, and everything sort of goes haywire. What is going on here? So, given what we said here, we have this word, Kirk, whose plural is Kirki, and then we get down to this one, and based on what we've seen so far, we would expect that depending on what the underlying representation of this consonant is, we could either get Gurki or Gurgu. Instead, we get Guri with no consonant here. So this one deletes. What is going on here? Can anybody think of what might be happening here? Well, here's one other clue. Right? For all the other places of articulation we looked at here, the coronal, the postalveolar, and the labial, we found one type of word that doesn't alternate and has a voiceless underlying stop in it, and a second kind of word that does alternate, that has an underlying voice stop in it, and that shows up over here. For the velars, we're still finding the non-alternating underlyingly voiceless ones, but we don't see any g sounds popping up in here. That would be the velar equivalent of this word. We don't find pairs like gurk, gurgu. There are no g sounds here. So what could be going on? Well, what if there were underlying g sounds? Oops, sorry. Be the voiced one. Well, in isolation, at the end of a word, we would expect devoicing. We already know that from looking at these guys, and we'd get gurk. In between vowels, or if you add a vowel at the end here, we would expect to get gurgu. What if there was a second rule that took the voiced velar stop only and deleted it in between two vowels? Sorry, I'm running out of space here. This is just saying take a dorsal stop, a voiced dorsal stop, delete it when it's in between two vowels. That would help us explain how this word and this word are different. Otherwise, this is pretty baffling, right? What explains the difference in behavior here? They both end in ka. Why does this one stay ka and this one deletes? Well, what if this ka is not underlyingly a ka? What if it's underlyingly a ga? Well, then what we'd say is it devoices in this context and deletes in this context. That explains why these two are different. But it also means that there's a totally abstract consonant in this underlying representation. It's totally abstract because it never actually surfaces in Turkish. That would be a standard analysis here of what's happening. Now, given the total abstractness here, I will say that while you can find cases like this, they're a little bit rare and kind of exotic. And here's a way of thinking about that. If you're an infant and you have to learn Turkish, learning a totally abstract underlying representation is going to be tricky. Right? You're going to have to basically go through some version of what we just did as phonologists here, obviously implicitly, and end up with a grammar that does both these things and infers this UR on the basis of no surface evidence, really. So you would expect this to be tricky to learn, tricky to acquire. And if that's right, then over time you'd probably expect it to be more likely to get lost than other kinds of consonants and phonological patterns. And indeed, in contemporary Turkish, it looks like this rule, which is what allows you to posit underlying representations like this in the first place, is probably being lost and is not fully productive in contemporary Turkish anymore, which means that probably these abstract URs within the next few generations will go the way of the dodo, will become extinct. So there are completely abstract underlying representations, or at least it looks like there are. They're fairly unstable compared to less abstract kinds of grammars. Right? And finally, the final case here is from an exotic language called English. This is American English in this particular problem set. And this is going to show you as well a case of total abstraction in morphological alternations and underlying representations. What we're looking at here is vowel qualities in English words, depending on where the stress falls in those words. So as we spoke about earlier in this class, when we talked about the English vowel system, in stressed syllables, English has 1 million different vowels. There's like 14 to 17, depending on what variety you speak. But in unstressed syllables, almost all of those vowel qualities reduce to schwa, which is written here as an I segment, but phonologically this is identical to schwa. Phonetically, the suffix might be closer to ik at the end here. And then there's various other schwas internal to the roots here. So these are alternations like acid, acidic, syllable, syllabic, atom, atomic, symbol, symbolic, metal, metallic, and so on and so forth. And the question here is what kinds of vowels have to be in the URs? Right? If you just look at the plain forms, you know, we're getting things like, I'm going to indicate stress with this mark, acid, metal, you know, there's no perfect minimal pairs here. Yeah, symbol, and so on and so forth. And even though there's no minimal pairs here, it should be clear that these vowels are lexically unpredictable, right? So metal is a word. Metal could also be a word. It happens to not be in English. Middle is a word. So the nature of these vowels, the stressed vowels, is unpredictable. It's phonologically contrastive. It has to be listed in the lexicon as an a or I vowel. Right? So this is definitely part of the underlying representation. Put another one up here just for the sake of having some more. Profit, again, the ah characteristics of this vowel have to be in the lexicon. Prefit happens to not be an English word, but it could be. Prefit might be an English word, not sure. Profit absolutely could be an English word. So these vowel qualities are contrastive. They have to be listed in the lexicon, but these are all predictable from being unstressed. They're all schwa because they're unstressed vowels. So you don't need to necessarily list this in the lexicon. These could all just have some sort of an unspecified vowel, or they could have schwas here. It's not totally clear. Okay, but then you shift the stress over one syllable. How do you do that? By adding this ik suffix, which has the effect of shifting stress in the root that it attaches to. And as you would expect, most of these vowels now neutralize to schwa. So metal, metallic, acid, acidic, symbol, symbolic, prophet, prophetic. And yeah, so these are all neutralizing to schwa, as you would expect in an unstressed syllable. This is going to be the case where underlying lexical contrasts neutralize in an unstressed syllable. But in this stressed syllable over here, these change into full vowels. So we're going to need to write a rule, right? So over here, before ik, we find instead, oh, sorry, we should be schwas. Acidic. Or this is really a tap, but whatever. Metallic. Symbolic. Maybe this is more phonetically like an I. I'm just going to write it as a schwa to show that it's not phonologically a high vowel. Symbolic. Okay, so maybe we need to write a rule that takes these schwas and turns them into full vowels when they get stressed, except these are all different full vowels, and there's no way to predict which one is which. Right? There's no reason why this one has to be an I vowel, but this one has to be an A vowel. These also look like arbitrary, contrastive, unpredictable properties of lexical entries. What does that mean? It means that the underlying representation of a word like acid in English has to have both full vowels in it. Same thing for metal. And as you can hear from the way I just pronounced that, this is a totally abstract underlying representation. The sequence of sounds, metal, never surfaces as such in English, but we can tell from these different contexts that both of those full vowels must be listed in the English lexicon. So this is a case, again, where the underlying representation combines a bunch of features that don't ever surface in exactly this combination in any English form. So this is, again, a case of a totally abstract underlying representation. There's some additional complications involving consonants in the last two data points here. So I am, iambic, This is a kind of poetic metrical unit, also part of phonological theory. And phlegm, phlegmatic. What do you think is going on there? This is not related to the absolute abstractness. It's just sort of interesting. Well, one thing you could say is maybe if you add this ik suffix to a word that ends in ma, you have to add a consonant, except again, just like in Tibetan, there's going to be some words where this doesn't work. So in systemic, you don't add any consonant. And for iambic, you're adding a ba, but for phlegm, phlegmatic, you're adding a ga, and it's in a different position. So it looks like those consonants are not derivable by rule. They're not predictable, neither their location nor their features. Therefore, those better be in the underlying representation. And in this case, it looks like they could only be in the underlying representation of the words I am and phlegm themselves. What we have to posit here are constraints that delete certain consonants in word final clusters like gma and mba. And if you think about English words, that actually seems like a reasonable blanket constraint. There are no English words that end in gma, and there are no English words that end in mba. We can see from our antiquated spelling system that probably there were some words that in Proto-Germanic ended in mba, and we can see that because of our outdated spelling system. But in contemporary English, that ba is not there anymore. These are words like dumb, which is spelled with an mb at the end, but there is no actual mba cluster. And are there some other ones? Climb, the verb to climb something. Again, so it looks like somewhere on the way from late Proto-Germanic or wherever we got those spellings from to contemporary English, we lost our mba sequences. And they remain only in these historical vestiges when you get alternations between things like I am and iambic. Interesting.